Hello and welcome to The Take with Sophy Ridge. We are here live in Downing Street this evening, and behind that door, the future of the Prime Minister is being decided. It's no exaggeration to say that it's been an unprecedented day. 39 MPs have now resigned from his administration. A flood started by Rishi Sunak and Sajid Javid that now courses through every level of government. And there have been some extraordinary scenes this evening as cabinet ministers went into number 10 and told the Prime Minister that he has to go. A delegation including two of the people who have only been in their jobs for just a single day. Well, lots to get through this evening here. We are told that Boris Johnson is defiant and will not resign. We're going to be bringing you the very latest on the future of the Prime Minister over the next 60 minutes. Good evening. A defiant Boris Johnson this evening stands on the very brink. Today alone, he's lost 14 ministers. No other Prime Minister in history has lost so many in a single day. And this evening, senior members of his cabinet went into that building to say the game is up, even including, we're told, the Home Secretary Priti Patel, someone always so loyal to Boris Johnson. But Boris Johnson himself is saying that he is digging in, he is continuing to fight. There could be a reshuffle. Number 10 has been clear. Given that it looks like we could be heading for yet another Conservative Party vote of no confidence very soon. It comes after a quite extraordinary 2 days. Let's start with a quick look at what has got us to this point.
Yes, I think it was a mistake, and I apologise for it. I think in hindsight it was the wrong thing to do. I apologise to everybody who's been badly affected.
We're just hearing that Sajid Javid has resigned.
The Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, has now resigned. There's been 7 more resignations in junior posts.
Just hearing that there's been another resignation. Let me just check who it is. Laura Trott.
We've also had a resignation letter from the Junior Education Minister, Will Quince.
In the last few minutes, the Schools Minister, Robin Walker, has resigned as well. Ali, we've got another resignation, Felicity Buchan, PPS to the Business Department.
Today is a big day as we implement the biggest tax cut. For a decade.
He knew the accused minister had previously committed predatory behaviour, but he promoted him to a position of power anyway. Why? Anyone quitting now, after defending all that, hasn't got a shred of integrity.
He talks about integrity. He wanted to install the member for Islington North into number 10.
As for those who are left, only in office because no one else is prepared to debase themselves any longer, the charge of the lightweight brigade.
6 others voted to get rid of our independent nuclear deterrent, Mr. Speaker. Today we are cutting taxes.
I have concluded that the problem starts at the top, and I believe that is not going to change. And that means that it is for those of us in a position who have responsibility to make that change.
Did you say pincher by name, pincher by nature?
I'm not going to get into some trivialising discussion of what I may or may not have said.
It's being reported that there's a delegation of your cabinet colleagues waiting in Downing Street, including the Chief Whip, the Transport Secretary and your new Chancellor, waiting to tell you when you finish here today that it's time for you to go. How will you respond to that?
I'm not going to give a running commentary on political events. We're going to get on with the government of the country. I've reluctantly come to the conclusion that there is an issue with alcohol.
Well, I mean, you're the last person in the room to accept that there's a problem. If you have lost the confidence of your MPs and you're required to step down as leader of the Conservative Party, you will not seek to dissolve Parliament.
Well, I think the last thing this country needs...
But
I'm not going to step down, and the last thing this country needs, frankly, is election.
The story is developing here. There is a greeting party here of senior cabinet members, and they will be wanting to talk to him.
I've been told that Priti Patel has spoken to the Prime Minister this evening, where she's conveyed to him the overwhelming views of the parliamentary party, and we know what the overwhelming view of the party is that he should go.
What we understand is that the Prime Minister remains defiant. He is not going to stand down. He is going to continue in post and try to keep this government going.
Well, what an extraordinary couple of days we have had. It's just gone 9 p.m. on Wednesday evening here in Downing Street. Where exactly are we right now? Let's try and find out. We're joined now by our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates. The Prime Minister's digging in.
That's right. What a day. More than 115 Conservative MPs over the last pretty much 24 hours, a bit more than 24 hours now, have made clear they think Boris Johnson should leave government. You've got 39 ministers resigning from government. Now, mid this afternoon, the word from the rebels were, we've done our job. We have shown the breadth and depth of the opposition to Boris Johnson. It's now for the cabinet to do the last few heavy lifting yards. And a delegation went in. Lots of the biggest names went in behind that door, including Priti Patel, including Brandon Lewis, including Simon Hart, the Welsh Secretary, and a number of others, all of which went in to tell the Prime Minister the time was up. Now, one more name was amongst them. That was Nadhim Zahawi. He was only appointed as Chancellor something short of 10 o'clock last night. Already, the rebels believed he had flipped after criticism from his allies and was going in to tell the Prime Minister as well, along with all those other cabinet figures, that he thought that meant that his time was up. But tonight, we understand, after many conversations, Number 10 believe that they are pulling Nadhim Zahawi, who at the moment is a critical figure in this government, in the tussle between those who want to keep Boris Johnson and those who want to oust him. There are just signs that Nadhim Zahawi may have been persuaded to stay on side, working through a new economic plan together with Andrew Griffiths, the advisor, head of policy inside Number 10. And so Boris Johnson will use that and his claim that his power comes from the people, the 14 million who elected him in the 2019 general election, to keep him in place.
Extraordinary, really. And I guess this is the moment we find out if the threats of the cabinet to resign are actually going to come true or not, whether they're prepared to lose their jobs.
I spoke to one cabinet minister going in there saying, he said, I've got my letter in my pocket of resignation, I'll use it. It'll be me or him quitting their job tonight. Well, neither of them have as of 9:10, and it depends on whether or not you can rely on MPs' backbones, so often not quite doing what they say. But if there are vacancies, there'll be a reshuffle tonight. Much more turbulence even coming on the rest of the day.
Absolutely extraordinary stuff. Sam, thank you very much. We'll be keeping, of course, a very keen eye on the comings and goings in that door behind us. What are the conversations being had? Has, as Sam said, anyone started to flip from one side to another? Every member of the cabinet right now counts when it comes to the survival of Boris Johnson. Well, let's speak now to our chief political correspondent, John Craig, shall we, who is live in Westminster for us in our Millbank studio. John, what is the word coming from allies of Boris Johnson?
Well, I got a statement, Sophie, from James Duddridge. He is the MP for Rochford and Southend West, and he is the Prime Minister's Parliamentary Private Secretary, or one of them. And he has given Sky News an on-the-record quote about the Prime Minister's defiance. Mr Duddridge has told Sky News the Prime Minister is in buoyant mood and will fight on. He has a 14 million mandate, obviously a reference to the general election, and so much to do for the country. I expect him to make senior cabinet appointments this evening, and I'm looking forward to hearing what the PM and his fantastic Chancellor, Nadhim Zahawi, have to say tomorrow. Now, that was about half an hour ago. Now, Mr Duddridge has just been in touch to say the economic plan is next week, not tomorrow. A change of plan, it seems. So, from the Prime Minister's, one of his inner circle, the Prime Minister is in buoyant mood, we're told, will fight on, talking about his mandate from the electorate, much to do, as he said at PMQs and in the liaison committee. Now, intriguingly, Mr Duddridge says, I expect the PM to make senior cabinet appointments this evening. So, As far as I know, we haven't had it confirmed of any more cabinet resignations as yet. We know that Mr Sunak's job has been filled by Mr Zahawi, as we've just been discussing, and Sajid Job's post as Health Secretary has been filled by Steve Barclay. And as for the economic plan, well, there is going to be an economic plan, but not tomorrow is the very latest information. It's coming next week. Mr Sunak and the Prime Minister were due to launch an economic plan together. They wrote a joint article in The Sun on Sunday at the weekend. But now, of course, it is the new Chancellor, Nadhim Zahawi. Let me just bring you some other intelligence from inside the Houses of Parliament. I spoke to one very senior MP who'd been briefed by a senior member of the Cabinet who went in to talk to the PM and told him, go now. And that minister was saying how shocked they were when he said to them, no, I'm not going. I spoke to another minister who quit earlier today, and that minister said no when I said that the PM was refusing to go. Another minister, though, who's still in post, said to me when I told him that the Prime Minister was refusing to go, said, well, we'll see how long that holds. Now, I also interviewed a short time ago on Sky News Steve Reid, the Shadow Justice Secretary, speaking on behalf of the Labour Party. It seems that Sir Keir Starmer will have discussions with the likes of Ian Blackford, who I also spoke to here on Sky News, about a motion of no confidence in the Prime Minister if by next week he is refusing to budge. And another point, tomorrow there are concerns about how the business is going to work in Parliament, given that so many ministers have resigned. It's culture, media and sport questions. At least one minister from there has resigned, and there's only Nadine Dorries left in that department, and the Solicitor General's gone just on the eve of Attorney General's questions. So unless the Prime Minister fills a lot of vacancies tonight, there's going to be some empty spaces on the green benches in the Commons tomorrow. But the big news is the Prime Minister is buoyant and will fight on. That is confirmed by his Parliamentary Private Secretary on the record.
OK, John Craig, thank you very much indeed. John Craig reporting for us there. And I think, as John was saying, it feels like we do still have a Prime Minister, but the question is, do we still have a government with all those resignations? Certainly top of the in tray for number 10 to fill some of those posts and do it quickly if he is to try and plough on. Now, our next guest, there were some pretty stinging words in the letter that he published earlier on today. Honesty and integrity should be the watchwords of all politicians. I no longer believe, after several resets, that these values can be re-embedded under the current leadership. Well, that was the Conservative MP Alec Shelbrooke's stark criticism of the Prime Minister today as he announced that he wanted Boris Johnson to go. He joins us now. We can speak to him. Thank you very much for being with us, Mr Shelbrooke. Why did you change your mind?
Yeah, good evening, Sophie. So I've tried to remain a step back and look at things stoically. But in Prime Minister's questions today, I just felt it was the final
just
straw.
Gone in through the door of number 10. Brandon Lewis there, the Northern Ireland Secretary, widely reported to be part of the delegation calling on the Prime Minister to quit. Now, he's been on a flight, a delayed flight, actually, from Northern Ireland, which perhaps explains why he was late going into the doors of number 10. No words for the reporters shouting questions, but Brandon Lewis there just going into the doors of number 10 behind us. We will give you any updates that we can from what is going on behind those doors. But in the meantime, we can go back to Alec Shelbrooke. Apologies for the interruption. It's one of those nights, I think, very fluid down here outside number 10 this evening. You were saying why you've changed your mind on whether or not Boris Johnson should remain as Prime Minister.
Yes, thank you, Sophie. And it was Prime Minister's questions. He seemed to have some strange views as to why Chris Pincher was in the job. And he started to say, I didn't want him there and I don't understand why he was there. I thought, you're the Prime Minister. You've got to be honest about this. Where's the integrity? Just say you decided that on balance you were going to appoint him and you didn't. And then there was the absolute bombshell from Gary Sambrook that the Prime Minister was effectively gaslighting his own MPs, saying it's your fault for letting him get so drunk when, he's of somebody who was alleged to have committed a sexual assault. But it's just got to the point, Sophie, where There are serious issues going on in this world. We're at war in Europe that's relating to inflation pressures at home, and all we're talking about is this. And I have to say, I find it incredulous to see a statement saying that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor will be laying out an economic plan tomorrow. Because if they think there's going to be any other question than, Mr Zawahiri, did you tell the Prime Minister to resign last night, then I think they've just completely lost the plot.
You were talking there about the integrity of Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister. Do you feel that you can trust what he says? Do you feel that he's a liar?
Well, I mean, clearly what's been shown over the last 48 hours is that for whatever reason it is, people are being sent out with a message, and then in my most generous mood, I can say that the Prime Minister is recalling that that wasn't quite right, and then saying a new line. And of course, I'm talking about the whole incident about did he know about Chris Pincher or not. And I think that this just speaks to a bigger issue of where's the concentration levels here? Is this about honesty and integrity, which I believe you really have to have honesty and integrity when you're in public office? Is it just basically he doesn't have that control? He doesn't think things through. He just says, oh, I don't know. No, I never knew anything about it, and sends people out there to the slaughter. I'm sorry. The problem is it's become a circus, and the circus has to stop. And I'm afraid it can only stop with a new leader.
You say it could only stop with a new leader. It feels like Number 10 are digging in, that the Prime Minister is trying to stay in his job. Can you see any way that he survives with the strength of feeling among the parliamentary party, or is it just a matter of time before he does go?
It's just a matter of time now, Sophie. I can't believe there's any serious commentator out there or any... there's certainly a majority in the Conservative Party who thinks it's just a question of time. No serious commentator's going to come out and say he's going to survive this. And actually, if you look at the vast majority of people who are flocking to his side tonight, they're people who just know they wouldn't have a job under any other Prime Minister.
How many others?
OK, thank you very much for being with us, Alec Shelbrooke. Really good to talk. Interesting to talk to you.
Thanks, Sophie.
Well, there you go. You can see there Alec Shelbrooke talking about how he believes the party has turned into a circus. We can talk now to our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates. You've got news for us.
Breaking news. Boris Johnson has sacked Michael Gove, just confirmed by Number 10. The man who scuppered the 2016 leadership bid ambitions of Boris Johnson, now fired by Boris Johnson. Earlier today, we understand Michael Gove told Boris Johnson he thought his time was up. It appears that Boris Johnson has decided that he's not going anywhere. Instead, it's Michael Gove who's had to fall on his sword.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we haven't heard anything publicly from Michael Gove, unlike some of his other colleagues. But as you say, there's an understanding that he went in to effectively tell Boris Johnson the time was up. There's history between the two men, as you alluded to. Do we know anything more about how the sacking came about?
So we know that Michael Gove went to Boris Johnson privately. He was trying to avoid the kind of psychodrama that became so iconic those years ago, and instead informed Boris Johnson that he didn't think that he could keep going. Now, it's no secret that Boris Johnson and Michael Gove have increasingly been at odds on critical issues, policy issues in recent weeks, not least Brexit. Boris Johnson taking a more robust approach than Michael Gove was willing to countenance. But Michael Gove has been by Boris Johnson's side since the start, and really at
points... the campaign, the referendum campaign.
And throughout the referendum campaign, and in government, where he cycled in and out of the very most inner circle. There were moments where Michael Gove was making absolutely critical decisions on things like COVID restrictions and things like that. But over time, Michael Gove, of course, is in the Department for Levelling Up, a department created effectively for him. The two have parted ways increasingly, Michael Gove sounding less and less happy to allies. Now, what's critical is that Michael Gove went first, but he's not the only one to tell Boris Johnson to go. So there's a question about what next. I can also reveal, Sophie, that there is one more resignation to come. If Michael Gove, I am told by senior Downing Street sources, was a sacking, there is also a resignation Now, the person I just spoke to didn't give the name, but we know a large number of people who went in there to tell Boris Johnson the time is up, some of whom, as they said to me, had letters in their pocket. So any number of contenders. Tonight is not over in terms of big news. But at the moment, Michael Gove is out. So when James Duddridge issued that statement to Sky's John Craig, referring to the fact that there are big appointments, big ministries of state that will be filled with new office holders tonight. Presumably the Department for Levelling Up was one of the departments that he was thinking about, but a dramatic moment for this government.
I mean, it's a big resignation, isn't it? Let's make no bones about it. You know, that this is not a junior minister to be sacked. This is a big moment with Michael Gove, even if the two men have drifted apart. I guess my question to you is there a point when it becomes difficult for Boris Johnson to actually fill some of the roles that are becoming vacant? Yes, there's a Prime Minister in number 10, but at the minute it doesn't really feel like there's much of a government.
Well, it depends how far down the parliamentary ranks, bluntly, Boris Johnson is prepared to go in order to fill the senior jobs, with the promise of more money and great prestige. But the risk of a hit to reputation, let's be blunt about it, for joining Boris Johnson's government, there will be some in the 360-odd Conservative MPs willing to take the call from the Prime Minister. He is, after all, the Prime Minister who's insisting he's going nowhere. It comes with the trappings of office. It's a chance to serve your country. A lot of people would be torn over that. The matter of resignation and serving your country, not a simple issue for many MPs. So I think that there is, I think there are probably people willing, but I think the quality of the names might start to. You might see people with less experience. But it's clear that we're on the precipice of quite a defining cabinet shake-up, because if you've got Nadhim Zahawi potentially staying in post, the big question next, I suppose, is if Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, said that she thinks that Boris Johnson should go, as there have been reports, then does that also qualify for the sack? We also know that Grant Shapps told Boris Johnson that he thought his time was up. Now, critically about Grant Shapps, he's another inner circle figure who has been by Boris Johnson's side all the way through and effectively helped fight that first vote of no confidence, has had that spreadsheet, his own private famous spreadsheet,
famous to his own leadership campaign.
Absolutely, famously predicting within one or two what the number was going to be of MPs who were going to vote in that first vote of no confidence. Grant Shapps is saying, you don't have the numbers, Prime Minister. That's a pretty big moment, just because of the loyalty Grant Shapps has shown up until this point. But do these people, having gone in prepared to threaten their resignation, then follow through with that threat, or in the face of Boris Johnson staring them down? And what we understand is Boris Johnson is making a very punchy argument. He is saying, I'm going nowhere, you're going to have to drag me out. Sure, there are parliamentary processes that we can use, but I'm intending to reboot the party. Two things, I think, are going to happen. You're going to have a reshuffle, but you're also going to have this dangling by Boris Johnson of an economic plan. That is code for the kinds of tax cuts that so many Conservatives have wanted, but Rishi Sunak wasn't keen on when he was Chancellor, because that would have meant basically borrowing to fund them. Now, with Rishi Sunak gone, effectively, can Nadhim Zahawi start spraying public money in order to shore up Boris Johnson and, bluntly, Nadhim Zahawi, not a man without ambition of his own? So could we see actually the economic direction of this country starting to alter in favour of something even more populist? Boris Johnson questioned on this, of course, earlier today at the liaison committee, didn't deny that we could see a bit of a change of direction.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's very difficult not to look through the lens of all of this about who could be the next leader to take over from Boris Johnson. Because, yes, he is defiant, he says he's not going anywhere. But, of course, as everyone knows, it may not be his decision at the end if the 1922 committee do convene to change the rules and so on. So let's talk about leadership for a bit, shall we? We saw, of course, Sajid Javid give what sounded to many like a leadership pitch in his resignation speech earlier today. We talked about Nadhim Zahawi. Michael Gove is a bit of an operator, isn't he? Perhaps his own leadership ambitions may have been quashed, but he certainly strikes me as the kind of man who, now he's on the backbenches, could be involved in some of the manoeuvrings that are almost certainly going on.
Yes, because there's been so much turmoil over really all the years back to 2016. There are an awful lot of kingmakers on the Conservative backbenchers. Michael Gove is one. He's well connected in parts of the party. Of course, a leadership contender himself. Gavin Williamson, probably not in the race, but again will be seen as somebody pulling strings behind the scene. But when you get to it, there's a question about who the main contenders might be. Nadhim Zahawi, I think, is one. But you've also got a question of who will represent the right. Could that be potentially Suella Braverman? Steve Baker was today talking about throwing his hat in the ring. And then from the other wing of the party, Jeremy Hunt, former Health Secretary, also a leadership contender, although he wouldn't do that well, recent polling suggests. When we get to this contest, it's going to be a huge field. It's going to be incredibly messy, define the direction of the Conservative Party. That's possibly why we do have some nerves about MPs pressing the button and going into it.
Fascinating stuff. Sam, thank you very much for bringing us that breaking news. Sam Coates there with the line that Michael Gove has been sacked from the Cabinet. Levelling Up Secretary like Michael Gove sacked by Boris Johnson and potentially another resignation to come. We can talk now to our next guest, Bob Seeley, another Conservative MP who is making it clear today that he wants the Prime Minister to resign. He is the MP for the Isle of Wight. He joins us now live. Thank you for being with us. First of all, your reaction, please. Michael Gove has been sacked by the Prime Minister.
Well, it's not a boring day in politics. It's an exciting and interesting day. I've literally just seen the news, and I was thinking, oh my God, what am I going to say when you ask me the question? So I'm not quite sure. I think, unfortunately, this is all part of an end game, and I don't see any way out of it, apart from Boris very sadly stepping down in the coming days, because otherwise I think there will be another vote. I voted for Boris last time. I voted for him in 2 out of the 3 rounds of the leadership election. And I'm really sorry it's come to this, but I can't see any other way out, because we need to have a new leader. We need to have a new government with a new agenda, because we have to deal with the very significant problems our country is facing. And people are not going to forgive us if we indulge in sort of endless fighting amongst ourselves. So this needs to happen sooner rather than later. We need to get a new leader in place quite quickly, and then we need to move on.
It's interesting because you say that, you know, Conservative MPs won't be forgiven for indulging in continued infighting. It's very similar to the line that Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, is giving for the reason that he wants to stay in office. It does feel like he's digging in, and he's saying that it would be effectively indulgent to replace him. He wants to get on with the job. I mean, do you think that he has a point?
No, I don't agree, with great respect to him, because the noise is off, and the noises and all the ethical questions coming out of Downing Street, it just distracts from the business of government. And the one thing that is affecting every single person who is watching your programmes is the 10% inflation. Everyone is going to be poorer next year because of that. You know, there are significant cost of living crises. COVID has still had a profound impact on our society. The war in eastern Ukraine is having a profound impact. All these things are very important to our future, and yet everything seems to be coming second to ethical questions around the Prime Minister. I voted for the Prime Minister in the vote of confidence a month ago because I was hoping that would draw a line under it. I was still willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. And I'm afraid to say that I think that the Chris Pincher affair has really, I think it has been, you know, the final straw for quite a lot of people, and clearly for lots of ministers as well who've been resigning today.
Yeah, as you say, it's been quite an extraordinary day. We're taking a step back. 39 ministers and aides resigning.
Yeah.
He's obviously lost members of the cabinet.
I'm quite glad I'm on the island.
As well. I'm just going to pause now because we believe we've got 2 more resignations have come in. James Daly has also resigned. And also David Mundell has resigned. We can bring Sam Coates in at this point, shall we? 2 more resignations. I think that makes it 41 in total.
That's right. Now, these are people at the slightly lower end of the ministerial rung, without being too rude to them. James Daly is a PPS, a ministerial aide at the Department for Work and Pensions. He's released his letter to the Prime Minister saying, due to recent events, it's become very clear that that you're sadly unable to lead our government and deliver on policies that will change the lives for better and create opportunity for all. The other figure to have gone is David Mundell. Now, he's a trade envoy. They're the kind of cross-party figures. He was trade envoy to New Zealand. I can see that being something of a wrench. He, of course, used to be Scottish Secretary. Trade envoy, quite a nice role. You go and quite a lot of travelling, a lot of soft diplomacy. So I think that will be quite clear. We're now in the phase where Boris Johnson is both making dramatic and in some cases tough decisions, but also Downing Street and Boris Johnson's allies are trying to get out messages, defensive messages, to show that Boris Johnson is on top of things, not just at the mercy of events. Nadine Dorries, of course, one of the chief supporters of Boris Johnson in Cabinet, has just put this message on social media. She says the Prime Minister's priority is to stabilise the government, set a clear direction for the country and continue to deliver promises that he and the British public voted for. So there is a little bit of a concession in that Nadine Dorries message that perhaps there isn't a great deal of stability, that there isn't quite the kind of direction that they would like at the moment, which is pretty extraordinary for an ally of the Prime Minister to admit. Here we are almost 3 years into Boris Johnson's time in Downing Street, and for one of his top allies to say, oh, we haven't quite got the direction certain. Now, clearly, they would say people have pushed them off course, rebels have pushed them off course, but nevertheless, that's the message they're putting out tonight.
Interesting stuff. Thank you very much, Sam. And it does really feel, doesn't it, that it is this process of even the more junior resignations leading to an impression that it's going to be very, very difficult for Boris Johnson to form and maintain a government. Let's have a little bit more with Bob Seeley, shall we, who's been waiting patiently for us while we did that breaking news. So thank you for that. Just finally, it feels like Boris Johnson is digging in extraordinarily in some ways because he's lost so many members of his government. What happens next week if the Prime Minister refuses to resign?
I think there will be a new round of elections. I think there will be another vote of confidence. The rules will be changed. Probably there will be quite a few, maybe several dozen people like myself who voted for the Prime Minister last time who will probably not vote for him this time, sadly. So I suspect the numbers will go up from 148, undoubtedly, probably to over 200, so between 200, 250 is my guess. But I suspect he will be sadly defeated on that. And I'm wondering for him, it would be better to go earlier, and so we can move to get a hustings, to get our candidates, the last two candidates, whittle that process down and present those candidates to the Conservative Party, preferably maybe even before recess, because we need a new direction and we need to move on from where we are now. We have really important work to do internationally, nationally, and on the Isle of Wight as well. And we need a government focus to be able to deliver that new agenda. So it's a positive time, potentially, but we've just got to overcome a couple of hurdles. And then we need to get back to the business of governing and reminding people why we had that 80-seat majority in the first place. And I'm sure, because there are a lot of very talented potential leaders, that we can do that and do that quickly.
To do it quickly, as you say, you would need the Prime Minister to effectively step down. It does feel like what is happening behind number 10 tonight is critical with members of the Cabinet. What would you say to Cabinet members who are perhaps wrestling right now with their consciences, whether they should resign or not? What would your message to them be?
What's that line from Macbeth? If it were done too well, it were done quickly. I think the party has now moved. I think the party has made up its mind. I think the party is undoubtedly going to ask Boris, or not give Boris its support when there is going to be another vote. So I think for the sake of Boris's reputation, I would look at stepping down as sooner rather than later, because I do not think he will win a vote of confidence, sadly. That will give us the opportunity to move on and get another leader, whether it's Sarge or Rishi or Penny or Liz. But we've got a lot of very good candidates, and we know we've got an important job to do. We know we're the right party to do it, because the Labour Party are not fit for government. And we need to get out there and show leadership and show perseverance, determination, and all the other things that we are known for. And we need to get back talking to the British people about the things that matter for them, because everybody listening to this programme is being affected by the cost of living crisis, by the inflation, potentially by the war in Eastern Europe, because it is very dangerous and we shouldn't be normalising what's happening. And we need a government that's relentlessly focused. On the Isle of Wight, I need people delivering. I need ministers delivering for my agenda here. And we're not going to get that with the endless noises off and the ethical questions that sadly we've had. We had the chance to draw a line under it, and sadly, because of the Chris Pincher affair, it has not worked. So we need to move on, and we need to get a new leader with a new vision, a new agenda, a new government, and a new chance to rebuild our relationship with the British people.
OK, thank you very much for being on the programme this evening. Bob Seeley there talking to us from a very picturesque looking Isle of Wight. Well, we can talk now to our chief political correspondent, John Craig, who is in Westminster for us this evening. John, I think you're joined by somebody.
Sophie, I'm joined by James Duddridge, one of the Prime Minister's parliamentary private secretaries, who gave us a statement a short time ago talking about the PM being buoyant and so on, and fighting on and planning to unveil an economic plan along with his new Chancellor. James Duddridge is with me now, MP for Rochford and Southend West. Mr Duddridge, you've been with the PM all day. You said in your statement he's buoyant. Is he really buoyant?
He is buoyant. He's up for a fight. He knows it's going to be difficult, but he asked me to leave him Downing Street, come over here, tell members of Parliament that he's listened, but he's up for a fight. He's going to make some changes. He's going to make some cabinet appointments today. I wasn't in on the meeting, but I'm told he sacked Michael Gove. There's a number of other appointments to be made. He will be engaging with that today as we go through. Nadeem Zahawi's solidly behind him, so reports there were wrong. He's going to announce a new economic strategy. That's going to happen sometime next week. But as a tax-cutting Conservative, I'm really pleased to say that there will definitely be tax cuts in that speech. I don't know the details. We'll have to wait for that. But that is the red meat that the backbenchers wanted. We're going to see him coming out fighting, making some changes, making tax cuts and moving forward. He's got a 14 million mandate from the British public. He now needs to deliver that. Now is not the time to have a stupid election and look introverted. This is a time to worry about the issue of Ukraine, to get the tax cuts, to get the economy back on track and move forward. And he really is up for it.
I think a lot of people might say the red meat is the sacking of Michael Gove. I mean, you slipped that in there in the middle of your answer as if it was just a minor thing. Why has he sacked Michael Gove?
I don't know. I wasn't.
You must have an idea. Has he been going around saying that Michael Gove's a disloyal so-and-so?
I genuinely don't know.
Mr Gove's become the first person I can think of to be sacked by 3 Prime Ministers. David Cameron sacked him as Education Secretary. Theresa May sacked him when she became Prime Minister. And now Boris Johnson sacked him.
My job is not to be disrespectful of colleagues. It's simply to pass on the mood of the Prime Minister and say what he's doing. There were question marks over what he was going to do after the meetings in Downing Street. It's been very clear he's moving forward.
14 million. Now, we've heard the PM talk about that. You've mentioned it a couple of times. That's all very well, but the fact is he doesn't appear to have the support of many cabinet ministers and, we believe, a majority of Conservative backbenchers. It doesn't matter about the 14 million majority mandate, does it? Surely what matters, the electorate that matters right now, is Tory MPs, and they've turned on him.
Well, it's clearly some have, and the message from many
30
people
or 40 ministers have quit.
Yeah, well, we will appoint new ministers. There's plenty of talent within the party. Well, I'm not going to go through the cabinet reshuffle, but I know that there are plenty of people keen, willing and able to serve, and will do so under Boris Johnson.
Brandon Lewis, we believe, has gone into number 10. Is he getting a new job? What's he getting?
I don't know. I'm not in charge of the Prime Minister's appointments diary.
Take us through the Prime Minister's day, because you said you've been with him all day. I mean, who... Were you
in
the room, for
day.
example, when the cabinet minister said to him, "Time's up, Boris, you've got to go"?
I don't recognise the reports of the cabinet all being in the room with the Prime Minister.
Oh, so was it one by one?
I wasn't in a meeting. I don't know about that meeting.
But we've had it confirmed by senior members of Parliament that when I was told by a very, very senior MP that the cabinet went in and said to him, "Prime Minister, game's up, time to go," and he said, "No, I'm not going." And that's correct, isn't it?
I don't know if that's correct.
Well, I told him. He said,
I'll tell you what. I can only say what I know.
Yeah.
So what I do know is a number of cabinet people turned up. They had chats with his team. They had a chat with him at various points, and he made it clear that he was fighting on.
Why are you staying loyal?
Well, because Boris Johnson is right for the country and right for the party. I mean, he's got an electoral magic that he showed as Mayor of London. I believe he'll deliver Brexit. I believe he's the best person still. No one's perfect, and clearly he has made some mistakes. But he can move on from this, and one of the things the party want are tax cuts, and I think that's really going to reassure people.
We didn't see much electoral magic in Tiverton and Honiton, Wakefield, before that Shropshire North. I mean, it seems to be the 3 Ps have done for him: Patterson, Partygate and now Pincher. And he's made a right hash of all 3, hasn't he?
Well, mid-term, we always lose by-elections. So the more recent ones are an anathema in many ways. We're back to business as usual. People are
not back to business as usual.
Business as usual in relation to by-elections.
You've got about 40 ministers, ranging from senior cabinet ministers to parliamentary
Sorry, John, I was just talking about by-elections.
Oh, OK. But it's not business as usual, is it?
Well,
it can't be. There's must be a mood of crisis in Downing Street.
You say that, but there is business as usual things happening. The Prime Minister has been signing. He's spoken to international leaders. He's had his regular meeting with the Queen.
Usual. Yeah, well, that's his weekly audience, I assume.
Well, exactly. That is business as usual. There is the business to be getting on with. He has consulted with his cabinet. He's staying and he's taking things forward.
You haven't even got enough ministers for DCMS questions and Attorney General's questions tomorrow. One of the DCS ministers has quit and the Solicitor General's quit. Are you telling me they're going to be replaced tonight?
There's going to be some major appointments made tonight. I don't know whether that. I don't think they'll all be made tonight. I mean, it's 10 o'clock, so that is unlikely.
Now, Danny Kruger, son of the famous TV chef, he's going to leave a sour taste in number 10 because he's just quit. What about that?
What was Danny Kruger doing?
He's quit because of
What's
Michael
he quit
Gove
from?
being sacked.
Sorry, I mean, he's not a minister.
But he's a PPS.
Oh, right, sorry. Well, I mean, PPS is... I say this as a PPS. It's the lowest form of promotion. It's an unpaid role helping your boss.
Now, Mr. Kruger is saying it should be the Prime Minister going, not Mr. Gove.
I mean, Danny, I spoke to Danny today and passed on the message to the Prime Minister that he thought he should go, and there are people that think he should go. Danny's one of them. That's a perfectly understandable view for some people to have. I don't agree with that. There's a number of colleagues that don't agree with that, and the Prime Minister thinks that he can go on and deliver and get those numbers.
You talked about appointments tonight. Are you expecting more sackings tonight?
I've not heard any talk of anyone being sacked. I mean, as I say, the news about Michael Gove was news to me. I wasn't in on that
just
meeting.
Going back to Mr. Gove, I mean, that is a major move by the Prime Minister. And clearly, he believes that Mr. Gove is either he's making a mess of levelling up, or he's disloyal, treacherous. He wasn't in PMQs as far as we can see. He hasn't been acting as a cheerleader for the Prime Minister. So presumably Mr. Gove has been sacked for disloyalty. That was why Theresa May sacked him after all. She said go to the back benches and learn how to be loyal. Well, she brought him back, of course.
If it wasn't for Michael's actions, which he now regrets, Boris would have been a leadership candidate and remained in and probably would have got in instead of Theresa May.
So you think that Mr. Gove is disloyal to Boris Johnson?
Well, he had been disloyal to Boris Johnson. He regrets that decision then. I can't speak for today.
OK, Mr. Duddridge, thank you very much. Very quick reaction, if I may, from Stuart Hosey, who's with us, the SNP MP. Michael Gove gone. Another one less Scottish voice around the cabinet table.
I don't think the fact of his Scottishness would actually change his politics. I have to say I don't rate Michael Gove quite as much as Michael Gove rates himself, but many in the Tory party do think he's a big beast. I think that's quite a thing and actually speaks to the utter dysfunction of this government tonight.
Thank you very much for a quick reaction there from Stuart Hosey. So thank you very much to James Duddridge, a very candid interview there about what's going on inside number 10, the thinking behind Mr. Gove's sacking, and the Prime Minister's defiance, fighting on and ready to introduce a new economic plan with his new Chancellor, Nadhim Zahawi. Back to you, Sophie.
OK, thank you very much, John Craig. John there talking to James Duddridge there, supporting the Prime Minister, saying that he's really up for it. He's going to be appointing new ministers and there's going to be a new economic strategy next week. Of course, during that interview, as so often has happened today, we've had yet another resignation, a junior resignation, admittedly, but Danny Kruger there, the Parliamentary Private Secretary, resigning as a result, perhaps, of the sacking of Michael Gove that has dramatically happened in the last hour. Now, earlier today at Prime Minister's Questions, perhaps the most dramatic question, it came from one of the Prime Minister's own, the Conservative MP, Tim Loughton. Let's have a quick listen to the question.
Does the Prime Minister think there are any circumstances in which he should resign?
I think, Mr. Speaker, clearly, if there were circumstances in which I felt it was impossible for the government to go on and discharge the mandate that we've been given, or if I felt, for instance, that we were being frustrated in our desire to support the Ukrainian people, or over some major point, then I would. But frankly, Mr. Speaker, the job of a Prime Minister in difficult circumstances when he's been handed a colossal mandate is to keep going, and that's what I'm going to do.
Can now speak to the Conservative MP for East Worthing and Shoreham, Tim Loughton, live with us. Now, thank you for being on the programme. Well, you asked a question to the Prime Minister. Since then, we've had yet more resignations, a sacking. We've had members of the Cabinet going into number 10 demanding that the Prime Minister resign. He hasn't. It is like he is digging in. What do you think the answer to your question is? Do you think there are any circumstances where the Prime Minister might resign?
Well, I don't know, and that's why I asked the Prime Minister and I didn't get a very good answer. And can I just say, Sophie, I really do sympathise with James Duddridge, who is a fantastic colleague, and to be sent out by number 10 to give Comical Ali a run for his money is pretty poor and defending the indefensible. The game is up, and I didn't take any joy in asking that question today, but it needed to be asked. And that crack in the dam we saw last night when Sajid and Rishi handed in their notice has now become a huge hole in the dam, with a succession of very talented ministers deciding that enough is enough today. And the Prime Minister really needs to acknowledge that, not trying to tough it out, because frankly, we're now in the end game. And he needs to acknowledge that. He needs to resign with dignity on his own terms, and we can all say thank you very much and then get on with the job of electing a new leader and a new Prime Minister, which is what we need to do urgently.
You mentioned the interview that we just heard with James Duddridge. He obviously has a different view to you. He thinks that actually they can appoint new ministers. There's plenty of people who are ready to serve. There'll be a new economic strategy next week and tax cuts. What's the problem?
I don't believe James believes that. I mean, it's just completely delusional. A large chunk of government, and particularly some really talented ministers who had every expectation of progressing and making it into the cabinet, have said to Boris what I've been saying for many months now, and others around me, that his position is untenable, and that has come to a head at last. Thank God it has come to a head, because it was completely distracting government from getting on with the job of government, which is what we desperately need to get back to doing. And so the game is up. He can't replace all those holes in the government with other people, because frankly, I think he'd really struggle to find people who would now want to serve in his government, because it's going to be a very short-term appointment, because frankly, he will have to go one way or the other in the next few days. I hope he does the honourable thing and resigns on his own terms, but if not, then the 1922 committee executive will change the rules next week, and we'll have another vote of confidence. And as Bob Seeley said earlier to you, I've absolutely no doubt that there will be a not insignificant majority now saying, sorry, Prime Minister, but we don't have the confidence in you anymore. And if we would have a very different result to just a few weeks ago.
It's interesting. Let's unpick that a bit. The 1922 committee, who can call a confidence motion if enough letters go in. But of course, they do need to change the rules first to allow Boris Johnson to face a second confidence motion after he survived the first one. How quickly do you think this could all happen? They're obviously meeting to elect the new officials on Monday.
Well, it could happen, and it needs to happen very quickly. So what the 22 committee executive have decided, and they have a lot of power in this, they run the whole election procedures. They've, and I think sensibly, decided that given we have elections, annual elections for the 22 executive, which are due to happen in the next few weeks, that it should be for the new committee to decide if there's to be a rule change, because that's a big move, and it's not something I would like to see done lightly. So they've brought forward the elections to Monday. So on Monday, all the nominations will be in. Every Conservative MP will have a vote. We will elect a new executive committee of the 1922, and they will then decide whether they want to change the rules. And they'll do so, I think, with a very fresh and credible mandate, having just been elected to those positions. So people can't cry foul to say it was, they haven't got a mandate to do it. Well, they will have a brand new mandate. And if they decide there needs to be a new vote of confidence, which is, I think they will, then we can vote as early as Monday evening or Tuesday And if that comes out with a vote of no confidence to the Prime Minister, as I very strongly suspect it will, then a leadership challenge and a leadership competition can be put into place very quickly. And it all, frankly, needs to happen before the summer recess in just a few weeks' time, before the final two contenders, as it works within our party structure, can then go out for the vote of the membership at large in the country. And I think that process needs to be revisited because it can take several months. We haven't got several months. We need to get on with this. We need to have a new leader, a new Prime Minister, getting government back in the business of running government.
Let's talk about that potential leadership election, shall we? Because it did feel as if one of the reasons that perhaps people stayed their hands, if you like, at the last vote was because there was no clear challenger to the Prime Minister. Do you think that has changed? Do you think there are serious contenders now? And is there anyone that you would particularly point to as having a good chance at getting the top job?
Well, there are serious contenders, and it isn't like, back in the time of Mrs. Thatcher that was Michael Hesdine who was circling with great ambitions to be leader. There are, and perhaps Rishi Sunak was a very strong contender, but recent events have rather blotted his copybook, I think very unfairly, actually. But I could reel off a list of half a dozen or more names of good, competent, credible candidates who could easily step up for the leadership and could easily fit into the shoes of a Prime Minister. They will be a very different Prime Minister to Boris Johnson. Frankly, anybody's going to be a very different Prime Minister to Boris Johnson, but that's not to say they can't do the job at least as well, if not better.
And just finally, while we've got you, the big news tonight is the sacking of Michael Gove. What is your reaction to that?
Well, I mean, that's pretty serious. I've worked with Michael Gove for many years, and it's no great secret that I'm not the biggest fan of Michael Gove. But Michael Gove has been, despite some incidents in the past leadership competitions, he's been very much at the side of Boris, and Boris has been listening to him. So for Boris to turn around, and when I think it was Michael Gove who went to number 10 with the metaphorical bottle of whiskey and the revolver, well, clearly Boris has downed the whiskey and turned the revolver on Michael Gove. Who would have believed it?
Pretty dramatic. I mean, you couldn't write the script, to be honest, over the last few days. It does feel like that. Tim Loughton, very good to speak to you, as always. Thank you for being on the programme. Well, it has been an extraordinary few days here in Downing Street. The news, of course, continued to come throughout the programme with the sacking of Michael Gove. We can talk now to Sam just to get a bit of a roundup of where we are. Obviously, the light's still on in that building. It feels like they'll be still on for a little while yet as the Prime Minister thrashes out his future. How serious do you think some of the kind of cabinet machinations are, or do you think Boris Johnson has bought himself at least a few more days?
The fight for Boris Johnson's future goes on unresolved tonight. He's trying to get back on the front foot. There is the sacking of Michael Gove. There is dangling of tax cuts by James Duddridge just now in front of the parliamentary party if they keep Boris Johnson in place. Nadhim Zahawi likely to spray public cash around. And then there is the promise of yet more from Boris Johnson reshuffle coming later tonight. So he is trying to regain momentum, look strong by some very aggressive briefing, particularly against by Michael Gove, but also just generally look like he's back on the front foot. But, Sophie, the numbers always determine the future in politics. You can do all the briefing, you can look like you're on the front foot as much as you want, but consider today's raw figures. 42 people have left government. One person, Michael Gove, has been sacked. There are 120 or more Conservative MPs who, since yesterday, have come out and made clear they have no confidence in Boris Johnson, many of them restating it. Now, that's 120 plus out of 358, so a third of the parliamentary party in public are saying no to Boris Johnson. In private, that number is higher, some people choosing not to do all of this stuff in front of the cameras. Unprecedented that a Prime Minister could continue in post with that kind of weight of opposition. But the question is, if Boris Johnson isn't going to go, can they drag him from office? And that question might only be determined next week.
You see, this is what I'm interested in. You know, you're talking about the question there about can they drag him from office being determined next week. And this, of course, is the 1922 committee changing the rules, having another confidence motion. We know that they can change the rules. We know that they've gone in to tell Boris Johnson that they're prepared to do that. We also know that if the rules are changed, it is almost certain that Boris Johnson loses. So why wait it out? Why the determined language? Why not resign? Is it because that he would prefer to be dragged from office rather than resigning?
Well, it's funny enough you say that. That is exactly what allies of Boris Johnson say is in his mind. He wants, almost the journalist in him, the performer in him, wants the kind of impression of the public of him being pulled from office against his will.
The men in grey suits coming for him.
And the whole of the party coming for him. Because I think at the end that would be something quite unlike anything else we've seen in British politics. If he was to walk away tonight, there's no doubt he would be remembered for having crashed and burned the end of his career in failure. This provides some drama, maybe just a change in the way that some of the history books might look at him. Because remember Margaret Thatcher's resignation. In the end, it was political pressure rather than a formal mechanism that got rid of her. Remember David Cameron chose to go out of his own volition rather than because of a formal mechanism. Theresa May could potentially see the end but chose to go in a dignified way. Boris Johnson looks, if he is going to exit from government, like he's choosing a different path. I can't remember a time where a Prime Minister was forced out, not by the electors, but against his will.
And like you say, the man who is all about the script, he's all about the narrative, thinking about his own legacy, how he'll be remembered. Really interesting stuff, and I guess that is perhaps the explanation. Thank you very much for all your analysis, Sam Coates. Well, a very different take for us this evening, live here from Downing Street. It's been dramatic. Resignations going on as we've been on air, a sacking too of Michael Gove, the man who has been at the side of Boris Johnson for many years, even if the two men, of course, have drifted apart more recently. He is the definition of a big beast. And the leadership candidates now circling. What's the best move for them? Is it to do Sajid Javid and to stand up against Boris Johnson? Is it to do Nadhim Zahawi and perhaps spray some tax cuts around next week to try and win over the base? It will be very interesting to try and work out the different tactics that will be used there. All eyes now on what happens next week with that 1922 committee coming up. We will have lots more news for you here live from Downing Street. Anna Botting is up next with the news at 10.